Welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name's of course Sisa or Chris, and today we're talking about the best value MMORPGs in 2020. So if you've been following along with the channel, you know that I've recently been trying to compare MMORPGs in specific videos where I'll take one MMO and I'll compare it to another MMO, and we'll kind of broadly compare different topics in-game, and it'll make for quite a long and tedious video. Now, I've had a few pieces of feedback about these comparisons. Number one has always been, hey, can you compare multiple games instead of just doing the two different games? And number two, there's always a bunch of different topics that I don't touch in those comparisons that people would like added to future comparisons. So with that in mind, I was trying to think of how I could add all of these different points and all of these different games without making videos that are like hours and hours long. And I was like, hey, why not, instead of just focusing on two different games and multiple points, I focus on one point and multiple games per each video. This way, as more distinct comparison points are suggested in the comments, I can do more videos and I can even toss in more games pretty easily. So we're gonna give this a go. If you absolutely hate it, let me know and I'll revert back to the old comparison method. If you do like this method, let me know as well, and suggest any other games and comparison points you'd like to see in the future. The one thing that we are going to keep from the past comparison videos is the poll at the end, so be sure to stick around to the end of the video to cast your vote as to which MMORPG is the best value per dollar spent in 2020. You can also, of course, skip ahead and do it right now if you're sneaky. I'm not going to judge, but if you wanted to stick around all the way to the end, that'd be super cool too. But let's get into the video. And to start things off, I guess we better introduce our contestants. You know it is the king of MMOs that can't even seem to kill itself properly, World of Warcraft! The game so daring that it casually announced its third expansion in the last paragraph of a random blog post, Guild Wars 2! A game that killed itself to bring us the MMORPG we truly deserve, Final Fantasy XIV. A game whose combat system gives a new definition to glitch art, The Elder Scrolls Online. The MMO that people love to hate, Black Desert Online. And finally, an MMORPG that's proved over countless years that gameplay is greater than graphics, Old School Runescape. And there you have it, we have our lists of opponents, we are ready for battle, let's get into it. I will be listing these games in the order of least expensive to most expensive to play. Do note though, this is not the ranking of how much value these games offer, as I do think some of the more expensive games might offer more value in terms of playable content than some of the cheaper options. We'll discuss more of that at the end when we decide which game is truly the most valuable. So the first game on our list is Guild Wars 2. This might be a bit of a surprise to some people as it used to be a buy-to-play game, and in fact it is still a game that you have to pay for each of the expansions that come to it. However, the entire base game of Guild Wars 2 has been free to play for quite some time, and that's a tremendous amount of content for someone who hasn't played the game before, or if you're trying to get a friend or a spouse to try the game, this is a really excellent option. More than that, when you do want to pay for the full game, it's a very cheap game to buy. Often the expansions are for a bundle price, which makes them very effective to buy, and they're pretty cheap in terms of expansions when you compare it to other MMORPGs. There's also no subscription fee, which is just a great feeling, and you pretty much just have to make sure you log in for the newest content update to make sure you get it for free. So it's a really great game for someone who's casual, for someone who doesn't want to put down a ton of money, and for someone who just really wants to enjoy the content. That being said, some of the issues is that, hey, if this is your main game, if you do have a lot of time on your hands, you might end up running out of some stuff to do. Not to say that there isn't tons and tons and tons of things to go for, different things to grind out, but that tends to be sometimes the case for some people who are more used to a subscription-based MMO, where there is a more regular flow of content and gear to grind out. Alright, the next game on our list is Old School Runescape. Old School Runescape is a game I don't have a tremendous amount of experience with, but it's a game that I keep coming back to every so often, partly because of nostalgia, but also because they do certain things very right. One of my favorite things is that you actually share an account between your computer and the Old School Runescape app on your phone. So it's a really fun game that actually plays pretty similarly to the computer version on a phone, and sometimes actually feels better just with how you're able to actually touch the screen. So it's a pretty interesting feeling that way. The reason it's positioned at this point in this list is because they do have a free version of the game. You can play for free for quite some time, and as someone who plays it extremely casually, I've never had to pay anything to play the game. I've just been very focused on getting the skills I do have, exploring the lands I do have, and just really experiencing what the game has to offer. That being said, if you were someone who was looking to make this their primary MMO, you would probably need to go ahead and get the membership, which is a sub fee, which a lot of people don't like, but it is just a sub fee. You don't have to buy anything else if you don't want to. There is also the option to pay for the sub fee in-game gold. They call them bonds, I believe, so you can buy those from other players, and that will give you some of the membership for your character. So there is that option, which is really nice as well. Now, whenever there are these options in games, it typically, like if you're looking at absolute value and you have a stable job, it typically makes more sense to just pay the sub fee with real world dollars. But if you're someone who's really just trying to limit the amount you're spending on games, say in your budget or something like that, it's nice to have that option. The last point, and I've done a bit of reading about this, but I've never actually tried it myself, is I believe the membership works for Old School Runescape, but it also works for RuneScape 3. So if you're someone who's interested in both games, you get a little bit of extra value from that membership, and it works for both games together. The next game we're going to be talking about is the Elder Scrolls Online. The Elder Scrolls Online, or ESO if you prefer, is a very interesting game as it offers players a ton of payment options, as well as a lot of flexibility in terms of how much they're willing to pay to play the game. So first off, the game is buy to play. This price, like entry price, does vary a lot depending on if the game is on sale, and they will have really big sales for ESO. Like it'll even go up to like 70% sometimes. So if you are someone who's on the fence about it, just kind of wait and watch that. The base game also does typically include some more content. Like currently it's a bundle for the base game and Morrowind usually. This might change depending on when you're watching this video, so it's really hard for me to guarantee that, but it's something to keep in mind as well. So that very base entry fee does give you a tremendous amount of content to play. I simply bought that, and I've been playing for about 150 hours with still tons and tons to do in the world. If you're just an explorer or someone who's trying to really just discover what the game has, it's going to give you a lot for that base entry price, and you don't have to pay for anything else. Now, if you're someone who does want more, who wants some more content, there's a lot of options for you as well. The game does have yearly expansions. The newest one coming out is called Greymoor, and when you do buy that expansion, or chapter as they like to call it, you do get the previous chapters included as well, I believe. So it works really well that way, and it'll give you a fair bit of content. However, you don't get access to the DLCs. DLCs are their kind of in-between content patches. There'll be a few of them each year, and these will happen at regular intervals between the chapters. And they can be quite big and offer quite a few dungeons and new areas, so they are quite interesting. The way you get these is you either outright buy them from the Crown Store, which is their cash shop, or you pay for ESO Plus, which is their their sub fee, their membership price, and you get all of the DLCs. So it does offer you a lot of flexibility in terms of what you do want to spend money on and how you want to go spending that money. It's also a game where you can trade in-game currency to get crowns, which is their, once again, cash shop currency, to buy out DLCs. The issue with this, though, is that there's no like NPC that does this transaction. It's really managed by players trusting other players, which doesn't feel as good. It is kind of enforced by the developers. Like if you're going to get scammed and you take pictures of it, some people have had some success dealing with that, but it feels a lot more shady than a lot of these other games that do this, which is kind of unfortunate. But it is nice that there are all of these different options for players. All right, so now we're going to talk about Black Desert Online, and I already hear people typing the comments about, you know, the pay to win and all the bad stuff. So we're gonna start with the good stuff, and then we're gonna talk about the bad stuff. The good stuff: it is a pretty cheap entry price to play this game. It's quite cheap regularly. It goes on sale often. It's even been on sale where it was free for a bit, which is crazy. So it's a very cheap game to get, and if you are just entering the game, it's a very impressive game as well. The graphics, the combat, the immersiveness of the world, there's a tremendous amount of content for you to explore and enjoy, which is great. The bad part is that it is pay to win if you are someone who's trying to be the best, trying to be competitive, trying to, you know, do endgame PvP. It's not a good scene, and I'm going to be very upfront with that. If you're someone who at all is going to be bothered with those things, you probably should just stay away from the game, because you'll feel encouraged to spend the money, and then you'll spend the money and you'll be like, oh, I've spent the money, I should keep playing, and then it's just a vicious cycle once you get into it. So maybe it's best to stay away. I'm trying to be very upfront about that in this video. However, if you're someone who wants to treat this game like a casual game, if you know that you have, you know, maybe a few weeks that you're going to be at home more than you would, and you're looking for something to do, something to dive into without getting too attached, this is a pretty good option, because although there is all that messiness at the end game, there's a lot of really fun stuff you can do just leveling different classes. The game also introduces a lot of new classes, so something I like to do as a casual player is I'll try out a new class, I'll level it for a while, I'll explore the skills, some different parts of the world, and then I will leave the game for a while. And then I'll come back when there's another new class and explore it again. And because of that, and because I never really try to strive to be one of the best players, I never feel too pressured to put much more into the game. And because of that, it kind of stays at a very middle ground for cost. But it is a game that can get quite expensive if you aren't paying attention. So just be aware of that. So this now brings us to the MMORPGs that do have a required sub fee, and I typically think of these as the premium MMOs, even though, you know, they're not necessarily better, they just typically should have more content as they are more expensive, but we all know that's not necessarily the case for things in the world. The first one we're going to talk about is World of Warcraft. Now, World of Warcraft, or WoW if you prefer, does have a free trial up to level 20, so if you've never played it before and you're on the fence about it, you can give this a go. You should note though, it is fairly different playing at level 20 than it is at level, you know, whatever the max level is at the current time. This is similar to any MMORPG though, so if you are trying a free trial and it has a level cap that's pretty low, you should know that it might not be a complete fair representation of what your gameplay at endgame will be. But if you do enjoy it and you want to go ahead and purchase the game, you should probably go ahead and purchase the newest expansion so that you are able to get to the maximum level and enjoy all the new content. You typically will get a bit of game time with the new expansion. It's usually 30 days, but this obviously could change depending on what their current promotion is. Once you are in game and once that time that you got with the purchase runs out, you will need to have a reoccurring sub fee each month. Now, the big differences for World of Warcraft is that number one, you can pay for the sub fee with in-game gold in WoW retail. This offers a nice option for players who don't necessarily want to pay that sub fee to go ahead and make money in game and pay for it that way. I've mentioned this in an earlier section of this video. Typically, it's more efficient just to pay with real money if you have a stable job and you can afford it, but it is nice to have that option. I, for one, actually made a fair bit of money pretty easily in World of Warcraft and was able to pay for about a year of the game pretty easily in game. It's actually not that crazy. Even to get the first one, I just did a fair bit of farming for like herbs and stuff like that, and I went ahead and did it that way, which wasn't too bad. But it is just nice to have that option, I think. The kind of negative side of this, though, is that people can go ahead and pay more money to get more gold in game, which conversely can be used to get ahead of their friends. So it is a little bit unfortunate that way, that it offers that incentive for people to spend more money, so it could even become much more expensive of a game if you're someone who can get persuaded to make things a lot easier for yourself. Now, the other really nice piece of value is that you do get access to World of Warcraft Classic with the sub fee as well. So you kind of get 2 games for the same price, which is a pretty big added value that's just happened very recently. Now, you're not able to pay for in-game sub fees in WoW Classic, but you could technically still make gold in retail, pay for the sub fee, and then play Classic that way. So it is an interesting system, but it's just important to note that you can't pay for it in Classic itself, or at least not at this current time. But yeah, so that's kind of the payment system. It's really nice though, in the sense that once you have paid for the sub fee and you are just on the newest expansion, you know that you're getting any of the new content that comes into the game. You are, there's nothing you're missing really, which is a really nice feeling. So the final game on this list is Final Fantasy XIV. I put it at the end here because of the fact that you can't pay for the sub fee with in-game gold, making it probably the most expensive game just on paper. That being said, there's probably people in World of Warcraft who pay extra money to get in-game gold, and it actually probably cost them more because of that, so it is kind of a double-edged sword in that regards. But there are some nice things about Final Fantasy XIV, don't get me wrong, and it's also a great game. We'll get more into that in the next section. But what you do have is a reduced sub fee if you only want one character on your server. And initially, this sounds absolutely terrible to anyone who's played MMOs and wants a lot of alts. However, the big difference here is that you can play all of the different classes, or jobs if you prefer, on one character. So you really don't actually need more than the one character on a server. And because of that, you can reduce your sub fee by a few dollars each month. Obviously, it depends on what currency and how you're paying and all that, but it is a nice option that's available to you. The other big thing is that there is, once again, a free trial in Final Fantasy XIV. This one goes all the way up to level 35, and it allows you to try out a lot of different jobs and different types of content. And if you're someone who's really about maximizing value before putting any money in, you can actually go ahead and level up a lot of these jobs on the one character, and then really deck yourself out before you bite the bullet and go for the full game. So there is a lot of content for you to do that way. That being said, once you are in the full game, you do have to buy the newest expansion and pay the sub fee, either the reduced one or the regular standard version, each month. Alright, so now that we've listed all of these games from cheapest to most expensive, we have to discuss which game offers the best value for players. And this is a really hard thing to do because each game is going to be more valuable or less valuable depending on what kind of playstyle you have. If you're someone who is typically very casual and doesn't want to put a lot of money into a game, and with that is expecting not a ton of content, you might be looking at something like Guild Wars 2, where you can, very easily enjoy a ton of content without putting any money down, and then afterwards, if you do plan to pursue the rest of the game, it's not a ton more that you have to pay. Then on the other end of the spectrum, there are games like Final Fantasy XIV that have a tremendous amount of content, but you're not ever going to be able to access any of the endgame content without paying for the game, as well as maintaining a sub. In the middle of this, we have games like The Elder Scrolls Online, where there are options for people who just want to buy the base game and enjoy a smaller amount of content, or for people who want to buy all of the expansions and pay a sub fee on top of that to get a ton of content. It's really a very flexible game that applies to many different playstyles. Now, taking a step back, I think it's really easy to see the value in a game that has a free trial that is pretty much an entire game and then cheap expansions on top of that. For this reason, I think Guild Wars 2 is still one of the best value games for your buck. It's not the, best game overall, and it's definitely got a lot of flaws, specifically not really knowing what the future holds. Yes, we've been told that there is a third expansion coming. We don't know what that's gonna, have in it or when it's gonna be released. There's a lot of mystery. If you're someone who needs a bit more content, I would definitely look at games like The Elder Scrolls Online or Final Fantasy XIV, who do really, really well at a higher price point. Ultimately, this is just my opinion, and more than anything, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. So now is the time to cast your vote for which of these MMORPGs you think offers the most value in 2020. I can't wait to hear from you guys, and if you wanted to share your thoughts on why your vote made sense, please share that in the comments below. Or if there's a game that I haven't mentioned that you think should be included in this list, or in a different discussion video, please share that in the comments below as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.